What's up?
So just, they're all together.
Okay,
So just.
sounds good. All right, great. Okay. So with people in the room, you can't see that though. How do the people in the room? Or do I just go down?
Yeah, this is they can see this, that's the preview of the next one. So when you hit. Right here. No.
There we go. Okay, all right. Okay, hopefully everyone can hear me. Tom, Municipal Planning Assistance Program in Augusta. As a little bit about our program, what we do. I say program, I use that word a little, maybe. We were a program of one for a few years. We were a program of two for 8 years. Now we're up to 5, but I've yet to meet them all yet. So we're getting back to where we were at least in 2012. I've been doing comp planning in some way off and on, at least since 2005. I was still in planning before that, just not in this role. I've been through the old stuff, new stuff. I've reviewed some of your plans. I didn't cover Hancock County most of that time. We used to be split up regionally. I sat about here to that table from the guy that did. So, anyway, I won't go through, I usually don't use slides. Usually my conversations are one-on-one with the town, just like we were doing a minute ago. That's usually how my calls go. Usually my average phone call is about a 40-minute call with a town of someone I've never met. And I usually hear from them again and again and again for about 12 to 18 months. And then the rest I won't hear from again. They decided not to do it. So anyway, I hope that this at least, and I'll go quickly, I have half an hour. I usually don't use slides, so I'll probably be off track. You're not required to do a plan. I'll say most towns have comp plans. So just right off the bat, easily most plans have comp plans. I used to administer the first time comp plan grants, and those were grants given to every town. Every town was entitled to one comprehensive plan. And you had an update grant, you had an implementation grant. Some of the old timers will remember that. Those funds were eliminated in 2007. One of the reasons those funds were eliminated because the legislature asked us who hasn't gotten a plan yet, who hasn't gotten a grant yet. And it was like you could count them on 2 hands how many towns in the state of Maine had not had a first-time planning grant. There were a few that didn't complete the process and so forth, but for the most part, every town at some point, it was required back in the late 80s and extremely early 1990s. And but it hasn't been required since. Most towns have plans. Most towns have plans because it's the right thing to do. And I'm only saying that because yes, you need it for zoning. Yes, you get points on grants, some grant applications. It's required on some grant applications. If you have growth caps, impact fees, and so forth, it's required in statute. Now, I say that most towns do it because it's the right thing to do, because most towns in Maine don't have zoning. Easily, I don't know right off the top of my hand, but we used to keep track of this. I don't know, 80% of towns in Maine don't have zoning. You go at least that far. So 80% of towns are not doing it for these reasons, right? They may be doing it for maybe potentially some grant reasons, block grants and so forth. But most are doing it because it's the right thing to do. I know my own towns in that case, they did it just because it was just something they've done. And it's been 12, 15 years and it was time to do it again. Many of you have old comp plans. I'll call an old comp plan anything before 2007, 2008, something like that. And I say it's old because the criteria under which comp plans are written and reviewed has changed in 2008. So we'll call it old. So now a plan is good for 12 years. It's not that the plan's good for 12 years. The plan can be good for much longer. It's just that the state's consistency finding is valid for 12 years. We'll talk a little bit more. I'm not going to go through all these. Other things haven't changed. Again, I'm not going to go through all these slides, but we'll get into this discussion usually. People online, feel free to put questions in now and we can go through them either when I'm done or when everyone's done. Hopefully we can get my section done quickly. Okay, there's legislative incentives. You don't have to go through each one of these ones. Well, I'll read through these ones. So the incentives can be, this is all linked right on our website. I'm going to show you in a second. You can pull this up. This is usually something when I go talk to the comp plan committee, I usually I have this ready. And most people want to know why. And so the legal reasons why you can enact place-based zoning. Place-based zoning, think about solar farms. That's my calls nowadays, solar farms. So a town that has never, West Gardner, which you guys aren't familiar with West Gardner, that is the anti-zoning of Maine. So they called, and so they are interested. Actually, they were in the paper yesterday. The article, you don't get 5 free articles, but anyway, they were in the paper yesterday. So I've been down there, and they've been calling the state to come help, right? And so they're considering doing zoning for solar farms and actually mini storage buildings. Mini storage going right in town, right at the crossroads. And so, these are towns that they will build and enact place-based zoning. You can have a zoning ordinance that applies town. You can say solar ordinances must be this townwide. You can do that now without a complaint. But if you have place-based, you can do this kind of thing with a solar panel over here. You can do this kind of thing with a solar farm over here. That's going to be different. That's when you need a complaint. Again, I'll get to the requirements quicker. State agencies. Right now, if you don't have a comp plan, the state doesn't have to comply with your zoning. So so for some towns, that's a really big deal. So think about some service centers. That's going to be a bigger service center. That's going to be a really big deal. Small communities may not care. Qualify for preferred status and grant programs. Growth to lake. Okay. I'm not going to go through all of these. Some of these matter. Qualify for the authority to issue site location of development act permits. There are towns that do that. Just get through some of these other good reasons. Grant preference points, attract capital investments. It makes sense to have a good business plan for your town. Just a quick story. It was my own town. I was the chair of my planning board for years, and I was not on the comp plan committee, but I attended every meeting for the last 2 comp plans that we've done. Just because I was probably going to review it, so I didn't want to be on the committee. In our town, and every town's got their thing. In our town, we have a big lake. There was no there's no good public access. There was a boat launch, nowhere to swim, nowhere to fish, no beach, and we wanted a town beach. So most of the town wanted a town beach. Yes, we do want a town beach. No, we don't want a town beach. That was the big debate in town for probably generations, okay? And so the comp plan, kind of by mistake, came up to a conclusion that was adopted by the voters that the town wanted a town beach. Okay, it's more to the story, but the beach didn't happen, even though I went for 9 years and I worked for the Land for Maine's Future program, and they got a funding for 50% of a town beach, and the voters truly didn't understand that they were getting half of the property paid for. Anyway, side story. So, all right, now we'll get into the part I usually start at. So everything starts with the Growth Management Act. Growth Management Act, again, this is from the 1980s. Everything's, for the most part, similar to the way it was then. Not much has changed. There is a book usually issued about every 2 years. This is the Growth Management Act. If this was printed out in 8.5 by 11 pages, it's 77 pages. So very few people in your town ever have to look at this. Your code enforcement officer, your potentially like a planning board chair, maybe, if they're an involved chair. And a comp plan committee would not have to look at this. I would not recommend looking at this. So to interpret that, we have rulemaking authority. Then we have Chapter 208. Chapter 208 is how it's a comprehensive plan review criteria rule. So it takes a piece of this and it tries to clarify it. And so this is from 2007, effective date 2008. This let's go a little quicker here. So I wouldn't recommend everyone on the comp plan committee even look at this, okay? This is 50 pages. Usually this is going to be too much for most volunteers to look at. But the chair, absolutely. The chair is going to have this on them, a consultant, absolutely. So what I would recommend everybody have is the checklist. So all we did when this became effective, we took this and we cut out the sections, what's required in a comp plan. We put it in a checklist. So checklist isn't something new. It's not, some people say they hate the checklist. That just means you hate the rule. Okay, it's just the same thing. All right. So I would hand out a checklist to everybody in your town, on your comp plan committee. This is the checklist that I use to review a plan. So when a plan comes, and I'm the only one that does reviews, at least for the time being. Plan comes in, I write the name of the town right there, I write the date on it, and I just start filling it out. Okay, it's a third grader could do it, is what I usually say. Maybe a fifth grader could do it. All right, so there's nothing real scientific about it. Many plans will even follow this pattern, or at least their outline will follow the pattern. Don't have to. Many other plans will just create new chapters. It'll be like people and places, right? And they'll just put stuff into it, and that's fine too. Sometimes reviews take a day. Sometimes reviews take 2 weeks. And so I would become intimately familiar with this. I'd bring this to every planning board meeting. I wouldn't forget about it. You can craft and write a chapter, but then I would suggest at least after each chapter to stop and breathe and say, okay, let's see how we did, right? I would also recommend when you submit a plan, you don't have to do this, but I'd recommend you complete this. You can imagine if I'm reviewing a plan and I find something missing, again, I'm gonna find it. If I can't find it, I'm doing a search, I'm doing a word search, I'm gonna try to find something close to it. But what is helpful, if you say, hey, look at page 42, I may look at page 42 and say, originally, and just blow right by it, because it's not it, but it might be close, right? So it doesn't have, you don't have to hit things spot on these. There's a, I don't know, 230 something items we look for, 35, something like that. Some have higher importance, just in my mind. I'm not supposed to. They're all supposed to be treated equally, but some will have higher importance. All right. So again, I'm going a little. Let's go. Okay. So 208. I talked about 208. Cliff notes. Yeah. So the checklist is just Cliff notes. Think of it as that. It's just an easier, shorter. It's 19 pages, and actually, if it didn't have the checkbox spots, it'd probably be 10 pages. So that's much more digestible. Each chapter is about 2 pages on there. So if you're assigning chapters, they can tackle it. All right, our website. So this is how simple it is to find all those things. This is the website for comp plan. You'll see in the left-hand column, comp plans is highlighted. Most of you have been to this site. You'll see these bullets. The first one is the statute. The second one is the rule. That's the chapter 208. And then you'll see almost the second to the bottom one is the self-assessment checklist. That's your checklist. We call it self-assessment checklist. Original intent in 2008 was that was a stepping point to self-assessment. We were supposed to put me out of a job so that you guys could review your own plans. That was the vision, right, for that in the future. Didn't happen. I don't think it's gonna happen. Other states do it. But so you do have, so it's still called self-assessment. We actually called it that back then. Self-assessment checklist. So that's where you find your checklist. And then if you scroll down on this page, you would come to the list of comp plans. So these are comp plans. This is just the first sort of screenshot. That scrolls down and probably 150 or more on that list. It goes back down to at least 2008 when the new rule took effect. You can see towns on the left. You see Tremont's the most recent plan. That just means it's the most recent one to land on my desk. So Tremont was the most recent one. You'll see there's public comment dates. So I'm not gonna go through everything, but per rule, I have a process. We used to have someone who did this. Now I do it. It comes in and we do abutter notifications. We do state agency notifications. We used to send it to the legislators, the representatives, so forth. Goes to the regional council. We wait 25 business days for public comment. That's that first date. So for Trenton, it is September 22nd is the deadline for public comment. And then the completeness review. My first review is due October 6th. That's the completeness review. And then there's the consistency finding. So you'll see these yeses. You'll always see when you look at this list of 150, you'll always see more no's at the top. And you'll be like, oh boy, he's getting tough. It's usually the reaction I get. All that means many of those were no's at some point, right? So when you issue an inconsistency letter, they have, depending on it's either 90 days or 2 years, depending on the consistency of completeness. And then they issue that letter, and they'll have 90 business days, which is quite a while. they'll have that time. So in the case of like Brooklyn, for example, which is the most recent no, they'll have a response very soon, I think, in the next week or two, I would hope. They had a list, they had 9 or 10 things, I think, that they were just, I think, just overlooked. Nothing in and of itself was major, but there was a few of them, so called it out. So that no will be turned into a yes. And also at the very bottom of that list, Newcastle's also a no. That should also be. So if you look down 150 plans, you might, aside from those 2 that are still being worked on, you'll look down, you might find 2 or 3 no's, 150 or something. And some of those, Kennebunk, Georgetown, they let the 90 days pass and then they submitted a new plan and then they got a yes. So some of those no's have been corrected just in a different line. So getting to yes is I don't want to say easy. I can't say that, Jim. I can't say easy. Jim, getting to yes is more possible than ever. I'll go that far. All right. We do data sets. So what the state has done all along, since at least the early 90s, has, and this is in rule, we have to provide, upon request from a town, within 8 months of you requesting data from us, we have to give you all the state level data required for a comp plan. And if we don't give you that statewide, if we don't do it in time or we don't give you everything you need, it's not required. So if there was a particular data point that's required and you request it and 8 months go by and you don't get it, you don't have to have it in your plan. A little extreme, but that's the way it's written in chapter 208. So just recently, we were talking about activity in Hancock County. Hancock County is on fire for comp planning. It is like nothing. It's not even that many towns in Hancock. I don't know, what is it? 20,
37.
37. Okay, a few more than I thought.
But it's unprecedented. Yeah.
2/3 are somehow active, right? Almost 2/3, maybe a little less, maybe a little over half. And that's just, active. This is just comp plan requests. This is requests for data going back 3 years. Data is good for 3 years when you receive it from the state. I was dealing with a soils map this morning. It was an old soils map. It's a soils map. It's not going to change for 500 years. Like, you're okay. But data's good for 3 years. So this goes back 3 years. So you can see just going back a ways, Brooklyn, Castine, Gouldsboro, Clifton, Orland, Waltham, Blue Hill, Mount Desert, Penobscot, Serrano,
Technically, Clifton's not in Hancock.
Oh, it's not? Oh, that's my bad then.
I did help them with their plan.
Did you really? All right, that's my bad then.
Step up to the line.
Close, right? Anyway, Blue Hill, Mount Desert, Penobscot, Serrano, Trenton, Winter Harbor, Ellsworth, Hancock, Southwest, Stonington, Sullivan, Surrey, Deer Isle, Franklin, Sedgwick, and just recently, Cranberry Isles, Gouldsboro, and Waltham. So the fall 2023, Cranberry Isle, Gouldsboro, Waltham. If anyone else wants to be on that list, tell me by tomorrow morning. I waited an extra day just so I could give you guys a chance. I was going to send out my email that goes to the state. It goes to like a dozen state agencies. And once that email's sent, then you're going on the next round. So if anyone wants to be on it, just let me know. Email will be at the end and you can just Google it, you'll find it. So yeah, so we typically get statewide, we typically get 22. And I mean, typically, I mean, like I recently, Judy used to have me go back and look how many going back forever. And it's like 22 to 24 every round, going back as far as our records went. So yeah, when like fall 2022, you had like a quarter coming out of Hancock County. It's just a lot. Common problems. All right.
Just a note.
Yes.
Don't forget the islands. Frenchboro, Swans Island,
Yeah,
Cranberry Isles.
those were just towns that requested data from us. I don't know if you could hear that. So that list I just went through was towns that requested data from us. So if you want data for the fall round, just let me know by tomorrow.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's
Okay.
great to know.
Okay.
Because I think I do.
Okay. If you send me an email, just so I know who you are and where to send it. It's an email, but IFNW still sends out tubes of maps and stuff. All right. Okay. Don't forget. That's get that done while I'm talking. Okay, so common problems, again, last two slides here. So common problems. The first one is always interesting. So the authors never knew about the criteria. So we don't know, we don't talk to every town. We rely on the regional councils. We rely on Avery to tell us what's going on, or you to contact us directly. There are towns that work, today I had a call with Rockport. I didn't know they were doing a plan, right? And so my response is, make sure you look at the checklist, make sure you do this, make sure, here's the submittal form, here's the, and kind of, I go into panic mode because what happens is if they don't know about the criteria and then it lands on the desk, which happens a couple times a year, then it's a little scary because if it's a volunteer committee and they've never seen, and they're just looking at their 91 plan and they're just updating stuff, they just get in a tunnel and they just go down this path. And so a quick story, Kennebunkport. Oh, sorry, I got to start dropping some names. Kennebunkport recently. I told you this. Did I tell you this?
Yeah.
Okay. So Kennebunkport. I won't even get the dollar number right, but it was in the RFP. I forget the contract was somewhere like north of 260,000. It might have been quite a bit north of 260,000 to do the contract. And they hired an out-of-state consultant, and it was in the paper. And I hadn't heard of this consultant, and so interesting. I read the article. Okay, and I phone up and phone rings. I pick the phone up. Hello. Hi, we just got the contract for Kennebunkport. Again, more expensive than like your whole county almost. I mean, it's just the number just blows my mind. I mean, we did our plan 2 years ago. We hired our regional counsel, and I think our contract was like 23,000. I mean, it's not happening nowadays, but it was something like that, maybe 24. And so I think I had a budget of 25. I was all proud. Yeah, I got it under 25, right? And for implementation was the thought. And so they call, the very first phone call was they call up and they say, okay, I just got the contracts. Now what do we do? Like, because they'd never done a Maine plan. They'd never done a comprehensive plan in Maine. And so it's very scary. Happy ending. It was an amazing plan. It was absolutely pivotal, right? I mean, it was great. So worked out phenomenally, but it's very nerve wracking. So if you're hiring a consultant or considering a consultant, it's such a simple question. I would ask them, have they done a plan in Maine in 15 years, right? In the last 15 years, have you done a plan? That just seems like a pretty low bar. Maybe send me a copy, maybe send me a consistency letter or even an inconsistency letter. It's okay. Just kind of, so you'll know if it was like, because sometimes the plan will be beautiful, but it's just not written with the intent of meeting this criteria. So if you're hiring a consultant, I would definitely that's a pretty low litmus test. And then understand the difference between policies and strategies. This has happened so often that I tend to kind of let it go if it's not major. A policy is a statement and a strategy is an action item. So if there's a required strategy, let's just use a statutorily required strategy. 10%, 10% of new housing must be affordable. If you say it in a policy and it's required in a strategy, you do it every time. It's got to be. One's a statement, And I usually just real quick. I'm almost done. I use the analogy of like apple pie. Hey, apple pie. I should have done a slide for apple pie. The analysis is apple pie tastes good. It's fruit. It's got bread, right, or whatever. It's got, so it's got, everyone likes it. It's Jim's favorite. It's it goes good with ice cream. So that's your analysis. Your conditions and trends are your ingredients, your flour, your oven, your electricity for the oven, everything that goes into your pie, right? Your policy is I like pie, right? Your policy, it's that simple. It's just a statement. Your strategy is short term, midterm, long term, right? Short term, go to the grocery store, right? Midterm, mix the ingredients, right? Long term, do the dishes, right? Or something like that, right? So that's kind of the mentality. So when you confuse policies and strategies, it's that simple. Like there's the statement and there's the action item. Okay. Let's just get to why these are doing this. Okay.
You have plenty of time, Tom.
I got 5 minutes. Oh, no, I have a little noise, right? You went. So common questions. All right. And this is the kind of thing that will usually get people, talking here. How long does a plan take? I usually would say, and that's most people would agree, 18 months is a safe number to say up front. Usually not faster, usually not longer unless there's issues. The shortest, short turnover, well, I don't know. Yeah, yeah, one of those no's up there goes back to 2017. So, yeah, so it shouldn't take more than 2 years. Shouldn't be faster than 6 months. You know, shouldn't be faster than a year. But we've seen it. I've seen 8 months. Usually, when there's a purpose, small town purpose, right? And it's very easy to get your act together and quick. Small towns have what we deal with too. So I mean, it is not. I mean, 16 people. Okay, I always use them as an example. Kingsbury Plantation. So 16 people did a comp plan, made it through first time, right? Nothing to be scary about. It's a list. How long does state review take? State review, if you'd asked me 6 months, a year ago, I would have said, oh, boy. I was behind. Because I was down to one. It was me, right? For almost a year. And I'm the only reviewer and the only TA person, and I do the data sets. And, so it's just, I fall, and we had really, since the new rule, we really hadn't fallen behind. We were quite that strong. Sometimes you can extend mutually. Like I can say, oh, please give me another week, right? The rule allows for mutual extension. So right now, if a plan landed, and if you looked at the list that was on our website there, I just screenshotted that this morning. If you looked at that list, one of the deadlines that didn't have a yes or a no in it was Reedfield. That was due Friday, right? Just the other day. So, okay, I'm back to being late, but I was on time recently. So, when a plan lands, we have 25 business day public comment. So that's 5 weeks. That's just basically, I take it, I do my notifications, put it up on the website. You'll get a letter from me, and I don't touch it for 5 weeks. The clock just ticks by, and I'll work on other things. And then when that 5 weeks passes, I then have 10 business days, 2 weeks, to do the completeness review. And then I have 2 weeks after that to do the consistency finding. We normally put those together, almost always put those together. And in our new rule amendments, we're going to be doing rulemaking. We're going to be making this rule shorter. It's probably the best way to describe it. We'll hope to combine those for good. The problem is that those 2 steps are in statute. So, we have no expectation of statute. We don't want to plan. We don't want to plan for statute change.
So you're saying 2 months still, or is that?
Oh yeah, well, it's 25 business days and then 10 after, so it's 35 business days. 45 if you go stretched out, 45 business days, which that's nearly 3 months. That does add up. So you're in that 3 months range. I think 3 months would be very fair. I think it would be an expectation of towns to have their response back within 3 months. You have to look at the calendar. And so on average, we do 15 or so, maybe 20 at most in a year. This is probably number one question, this third bullet here. What's first, state review or local adoption? All right, my God, that has to be the number one question. So it can be either way. So a town can do it either way. But I don't think I've ever run into someone that prefers to do a local adoption first. But towns do it all the time. So all of them. So if Avery was doing a plan for Stonington, are you doing a plan for Stonington?
2018.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right. So if you're doing a plan for somebody, you would, if you bring it to local adoption, if you draft it up and it's beautiful and you bring it to local adoption and you go and you stand up here in council chambers, you stand up in a gymnasium, a town meeting, which many of us have done, and you say, adopt this plan, it's great, right? And then it gets adopted, and then it gets sent to the state, me, right? You're just dealing with me, so it's not a black hole, and you send it to me, and I send you, I don't know, maybe it's quick, like I've done. I don't know if I've done with you yet, Avery, but I'll just say, hey, this, right? Sometimes it's that easy, but more often it's more like Brooklyn, what we did with Brooklyn, where I think we might have done with Brooksville too. I think we did it with Brooksville too. We say, oh, yeah, which we did. It was like 3 or 4 things. Brooklyn, we sent them back and it was like 9 or 10 things, but they all fit on one page. Like it was manageable, right? And so we sent it back to them and expecting them to have something back quickly, and they're going to send it to me, and same day I'll go, okay, good. Like that's how quick it is. And then you go stand up in front of that gym one time and not do it twice. So if at all possible, send it to us first. It does take 3 months, but you'll only have to do it once. So just try to build that in. The towns that do it are the big cities, the big. We don't even know they're working on it. Scarborough just did it a year ago or so, and it wasn't a consistent plan. So it came to us, and so they have to adopt it again. A little different to adopt it there. They don't have a meeting like most of us do. Public hearing requirements. You're required to have a public hearing 30 days prior to adoption. That statute can be, Jim's probably wondering.
I thought it could be shorter, but it's 30 full days.
30 days prior to adoption. So depending on how you read the statute, it can be interpreted different ways. And so I believe, because we're all new staff now, it seems, but we've always run with the assumption that, or the advice that that's one public hearing required 30 days prior to your vote for adoption. I've seen others, not attorneys, but I've seen others interpret it to mean 30 days prior to sending it to the state, 30 days prior to different items. But you'll cover your bases. Normally, if we're in normal correspondence, that'll usually be something I'll send to you. Sometimes if it's a town that needs help, I'll send it with that findings. It won't be in the findings letter, but it'll be in the email for the findings letter. It'll say here, and I'll point you to number 8 in statute, just a little blurb, and then I'll let them interpret it. Okay. Can volunteers do it? Is there an easy way? There's an easy way. All right, you guys ready? If you want an easy way, the easy way. So this actually came up very soon after the rule came into play, and it was the town of Wilton. Wilton is a suburb of Farmington. This would be 2008. They were the first one that took us all by surprise. I'm sure there were professional planners in the state that weren't surprised by what they did, but we were all like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. What they did, now it's for small towns, especially mission-driven small towns, I think solar farms, wind turbines tend to be the thing up in the unorganized territory. I actually encourage this because it's a mission. There's a mission. They're on a mission. They took this checklist and they copied let's call them questions, requirements, and they put them into a Word file and they bolded all the requirements. And then after each one in Word, they hit enter and they answered it. And they hit enter and they talked about it. And they hit enter and they, and so forth. And so that's the easy way. So that's an extremely easy way. Someone like myself cannot say it's not there. The way the rule's written, I'm kind of paraphrasing here. I know this is being recorded. You don't have to do a correct answer. You have to do an answer. That's the way this new 15-year-old rule is. It just says you need to talk about something. You need to address something. You need to. This is analysis and conditions and trends. So you need to talk about your traffic generator. You need to talk about that. You need to address it. Low impact development. You need to talk about low impact development or something that's related to low impact. And so when there's an answer there, it's there, right? Check. Box gets checked. So yes, there's an easy way. And if you wanted examples, I said Wilton. Very recently was Prospect. Prospect is a very small town, surprisingly small town, Prospect. They did that, and so you can look at that plan too. And they made it through first time, no questions. All volunteers. And I went out there and sat with them a couple times. And, they were happy, and they were mission driven. It was a small town, mission driven. They had a purpose, so a zoning purpose. And so, Island Falls, another fairly recent one. There's many more. So, a lot of small towns tend to do that. Questions? I don't know how many people are online here. I see 8 chat boxes.
There's no questions, so.
No questions, okay, all right. If anyone's questions, my contact info is right there. Just go to our website, you'll see me on there. All right, sounds good. Let me know. Thank
We do
you.
have time for questions now.
Doesn't look like anyone has anything.
Oh, I just have one. So when we requested our data in 21, I didn't realize there was a deadline.
Oh,
So,
so data's valid for 3 years from when you receive it.
okay,
So just think, so that's all data. So state data is when you get the email from me that says it's ready. It could be 2 years old when I get it, but it's 3 years from when you receive it.
so my plan wasn't due by a certain date.
Yeah, so,
So
Talk to
I
me.
requested the new
Talk.
data,
yeah,
so we're good. We can take that.
you have 3 years from when you received it. So
I'm good.
I always, yeah, it's, let me know what it is. Much of the data, so we used to give data sets in boxes, like every town got 2 boxes, I think,
Yeah.
and a tube or 2 or 3 tubes. And we'd give them to Jim and Jim would disperse them in his region, right?
Wow.
And when he was at HCPC. And then we went online. I was there then. And it was a process. It was big. It was booking a room like this for 2 weeks kind of thing. And you bring in all the receptionists, we all go walk around a table, build these packets and binders, 3-ring binders, and it was just a pain. Color coded and anyway, horrible memories. It went online. And over time, very brutally slowly, that online data is becoming live, so it's automatically fed. So when you see the data sets, when you get the data set, sometimes you're expecting this wonderful magical thing. It's not. It's just some links. Like it's not, like 2/3 of it or more is just links. Like you'll get DOT sends out a PDF, 1-page PDF with a link, and I mean it's a little different when you go there, but some of them never change. It's the same link. So like State Economist, it's just a link to their thing. So it's not. So if you need new data, chances are you can just click on that link and it's going to be new data.
Okay.
And when it comes to local data, it's the same kind of it's in rural, that's the way it is too. So you could go to if you want to get a certain, you go to your town clerk and get, your financials, let's say, that's good for 3 years. So it's just from when you get it. It's some data, and I went through this with Belfast, who is just about to submit a new comp plan. They quickly did an amendment about 2 years ago. I don't ask for reasons sometimes, but they did an amendment real quick. Their data was old, data was extremely old. But we went through each piece. Some data doesn't change, right? Like I mentioned, soils data and topo maps, right?
Archaeology.
Yeah, archaeology, right? All your historic resources. And okay, don't do that one, don't do that one, don't do that one. And it was kind of time consuming going through doing that one. I just said, okay. But these ones we need, right? There were other ones we did need. But I just tried to make it easier for them. Some things just don't change. Our rule doesn't say it like that. I should touch on one more thing. Not applicable. Okay. Many of these things are not applicable to you. So, like vast majority of you, like a small town, I usually go through and I'll say, especially in the future land, if you just a lot of times I'll go through exemptions. No, if you'd have many in Hancock County, but I'm seeing a lot, especially on Oxford County. I mean, it's just growth area exemptions. You don't have to have a growth area. Your future land use plan can just be rural. So if you're that small, and it's pretty easy, you can do it with the village, just with the way the rules written, the statute's written. You have to not have public water or sewer, or not have a rate of growth exceeding, I forget the number, or a certain amount of I'm not getting it wrong, 500-foot radius circle so many dwellings in a 500-foot radius circle. And so I had to find out, dwellings per acre. Okay, how many acres is the circle? What's 1,000-foot diameter circle? What's the acreage? And you have to kind of figure it out. But it's or. So you can have any one of those three. So number one, water sewer. Most towns don't have water sewer, so they have that option right there. So as you go through this, you probably don't have a rail terminal or an airport or maybe a ferry terminal or these. So there's just things you're just not going to have. You don't have a street tree program or you don't have whatever. You're going to find many of these things aren't going to apply to you. You don't have to, just because it's there, you don't have to do that. So if you're a small town, where I talk about towns, 16 people, if you don't talk about your street tree program, that's okay. Like, I'm not going to call you out on that. Okay, we know that much, right? Now, if you're a town I don't know, Stockton Springs or something, or maybe a little bit Belfast. And I'm not sure if Belfast has a street tree program. They might. You know what I mean? I just don't know. So one reviewer might say, you didn't talk about this, right? But you just kind of have to use some judgment. So saying NA is fine. So you'll see small towns, especially the growth areas, the NAs are huge. And I just go through my checklist and I go NA. And some sections, transportation for one, there's no sidewalks, there's no bike paths. Many towns don't have snowmobile trails or, they're just not the trail networks. And I understand that. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Online now?
Yeah.
How important is it to have your source reference on maps or charts or?
It's not required in the rule, but you should do it. It's just good practice. A date is one thing that does get me. Like, I want a date on it. That doesn't seem like too much to ask. A date,
Good to know.
it's clear. So,
Good to know.
I just got one a couple of days ago. They mapped their future land. They were, it was an amendment. They were tweaking like one line on the future land use. They were actually reducing how much was in the growth area. So I was less concerned. And amendments are treated differently than a full review. Amendments, we only review what has changed. And so if you have an amendment, I'm only looking at what changed. I also have more flexibility on amendment. I can review it. It says in the rule, commensurative with the scope of the change. So I don't have to send it for public comment. If it's to do with future land use plan, I'm almost always going to send public comment. In this case, they were trying to make the argument that, well, it's so minor, and this is what it is, they want to show it. But the point of the story was their zones, it was like just picture on a map, it's like you got the different zones, but there were these giant gaps between them. There was sort of unintentional white space that if you lived in there, you would think you're in rural. And so it was like, I'm like, oh, okay. I think in that case, we don't have to send this to public comment. It's minor. And I looked at the aerial phone. This is nothing major. This is just a property line dispute being resolved. And so, but you're going to want to fix this map. Now, could they have sent a future land use map that had these odd, unusual rural strips between every zone that was unintentional? Sure, they could. We had Georgetown send us a future land use map where their shoreland was their growth area.
What's what?
Their shoreland was their growth area. So imagine a peninsula
How
town.
does that work?
That would be like, let's say Castine did it, right? So, something like that. And they just took their shoreland zone and that was their growth area, or stone, right? That'd be a great one. The shoreland is there. And they said, but this excludes wetlands and critical natural resources, which is a good thing to say. And so you just look at the map and you interpret it. And so, that's kind of like eye-opening. Well, it's allowed. Yeah.
Allowed?
It's allowed. Jim's wheels are working over here.
Ah.
So it's like,
Deer Isle tried the opposite, I guess, in 2006, where everything but the shoreland
Oh,
was
is
the
it
growth
okay?
area.
Really?
That didn't pass.
yeah. And so what I'm getting at is prior to 2008, we would get a plan. And a typical thing would be like, you'd strip out a road, right? Trent, somewhere here. Yeah, Trent, there we go. They strip out a road, growth area, from one side of town to the other. And we used to say, no, you can't do that because of
Sprawl.
sprawl, right?
Right.
And so it gave us it was a gray area. It gave us the leverage to interpret the map, right? You could say, we don't like it, right? That doesn't make people happy. So that's gone. So now a town with the growth area, however awkwardly they want to do it, they do. There's critical natural resources, there's things that can't be in growth areas, but you'll see that. So sorry, you had a simple question about
No,
maps
that's
and legends. So yeah, it needs to be legible, it needs to be readable. I had a question this morning about, do we really have to print it in color? Kind of depends if I can read it in black and white. I mean, or if the residents can read it in black and white, depending on how you're gonna print it. Okay, right? Thank
So
you,
one
guys.
question online now is just confirmation, I guess, more that Wilton actually published their checklist and answers as their full comp plan. That was it.
Yeah, the best thing to do on that one, in that particular case, it's probably an easier way to do this. So I went by it.
A lot of the 2008 ones aren't linked.
Yeah, so what Wilton is.
Okay.
Wilton specifically is for this reason. You can just look at it, and you could probably go to their and they're working on a new plan now, so that'll be interesting.
City website.
Yeah, so you go to the town's website and you can find their old plan, or you can look at our version that we have on our website by just going to this site and just scrolling to the very bottom. Again, this is our website here, and you'll see on the left-hand column, I have comprehensive plans clicked, and I simply just scroll down further to get to that list. You can look, and I think it'll hit you home. I think it'll hit home immediately. I think if you looked at Prospect, you would get just as much benefit, and it would have some current dates on it, 2023.
I wondered how they did theirs. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Prospect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah,
I helped them with planning years ago because they're right across the river.
Yeah, they have something to do with gravel or something. I didn't
A
want to
lot of
ask.
gravel there.
Or quarries. Sorry, it would be granite.
Well, I think it's both.
So, all right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we've got Jen Fisher, who's the town manager of Deer Isle and the chair of the HCPC, or Hancock County Planning Commission Executive Board.
So, well, probably be far less concrete, but that's my academic role in life. So I'm going to preface this by saying that there's a lot of disagreement about what is a goal, what is an objective, what is a strategy, and I'm going to give you my take after way too many years of hacking my way through planning. And as a parlor trick, that's a QR tag for my presentation. So if you wanted to get a copy of it, you could point your cell phone at it, tap it, or come back to it. So this is well into the planning process. In fact, it's in a lot of ways near the end of the planning process. So most of the work, I think, for committees is getting the goal, the inventory and analysis part done. It's just a lot of data, and that's what the state will provide you. They'll even provide you with some goals and policies or objectives, and I think the state even, in my mind, confuses those terms occasionally. But they don't tell you that, and your consultants shouldn't tell you that either. That's really a local decision. What is it that's important to you? And that's what I'm going to talk about for just a few minutes. When you get that done, and the future land use map, which is kind of a statement of your goals and objectives and strategies on a map, then it's ready for state review. And I'll say these words all float around, and you've seen a lot of them, I'm sure. Goals, objectives, deficits, opportunities, strengths, tactics, solutions, and a couple of them I'm going to hold on to, and a lot of them I'm just going to erase because they're definitely important in the process of planning, but that's not necessarily something that's going to show up in the plan as a required element. A few things I'm keeping, the rest are fading away. But these are the four I kind of always look for. And even the two on the outside aren't the focus of my presentation, but I think that probably starting, I hate to say 30 years ago, vision-based planning became the trend. And I don't think it really ever went away after that, that towns like to say, this is what we want to be when we grow up, or this is where we want to get. And in planning theory, there's a lot of discussion about what is a realistic vision of the future, what is something that's actionable, and what is just a utopian dream, something that will never happen, or something so vague and prosaic that it looks good on paper. It's not really going to give you the guidance you need. But a vision statement, as I said, it does focus the attention on community values, gives them a sense of identity and aspirations. I think it tells a story, and that's what a plan can do. Not the checklist plan that I guess some towns are doing, which to me doesn't give you any vision. It just answers the state's requirements. So I think the vision's important. And I think, ironically, I'm calling this the vision of utopia as a coastal Maine community. I think it's Ken Bunkport, ironically. And I changed the paragraph order, but I didn't change much else. I'm not going to read through it, but you'll see this in every vision. And I think that's something that I look for a town to look for some uniqueness in their vision, something that tells you about that town. It isn't just our tree shaded streets, scenic vistas, unspoiled coastline, tremendously helpful people who always come to your aid in a crisis. And you see that a lot in vision. It's not a bad vision, but it's kind of utopian. It doesn't tell you what your town's story is and what makes you unique. And I'd also say very often these terms get mixed together, and the mission, what we're going to do, I think is a little different from what we're going to be. And I think it may be perfectly fine to have both, but it's good to be clear about that. Our community will work collaboratively with residents and business. It's what we're going to do. This is the mission of our town. And this is, even within the planning process of writing a comp plan, it's also good to kind of distinguish between what it is you want to be and what it is you're going to do. So I think in this case, it's perfectly fine that they put it in there, and it is, but I just should be clear, one of these is what they're going to do. And it's utopian, so it has the sunshine. At the heart of these 5 elements I gave, and I'll throw tactics to the wind right now. Tactics and strategies are easy to confuse, and I do all the time, but think of a tactic as an even smaller step. You know, it's like, I'm going to take the boss to lunch today, or we're going to have a meeting to discuss this issue. Not really a strategy, it's something smaller than that. But these 3 are at the heart of it, and I will tell you a lot of disagreement here. I think of goals as broad and visionary. They're outcomes you want to achieve. They're outcomes you very often won't ever really achieve. They're utopian enough that the town will have sufficient affordable housing. Very hard to ever imagine in coastal Maine. The demand is always going to be high for housing, but it's something you work towards. And as you're plodding along that path to your goal, you have certain milestones. And those are the things that I think are more measurable. They're the concrete achievements that I hope to see in a comprehensive plan, statement of goals, objectives, and strategies. Then strategies, the things we do to achieve those things, the actions that Tom mentioned. I'm not putting words in your mouth, I hope, but I really focus on objectives as much as I can. And I'll say with objectives that there was a time in my infancy when we started talking about smart objectives. I'm seeing a lot more now people calling them smart goals. And that kind of deflates some of what I was saying, because I think goals are these long-term things and hard to ever achieve, and certainly not something quick enough that you're going to say it's measurable. It's specific. It's something I specifically want to get this done. I can measure it as a percentage or a number or something cardinal, hopefully ordinal, that it's attainable. It's not purely utopian. It's something I can really get done, that it's relevant to what I'm saying, and it's not sort of tangential to my overall path towards this goal, and it's time bound. And that's a very hard one. I like to see in an objective that we're going to do 10% of this by this date, and we know who's going to do it, and it contributes to the goal. And that's actually really hard to do. I can tell you every comp plan I've worked on, we're always backpedaling from that smart objective ideal. Okay, strategies, again, I think of as process. They're to help you achieve the objectives and ideally assigns a responsibility. Who's going to do this thing? You can assign a responsibility for an objective also, but particularly if you're saying the town will create a committee. Well, who's creating the committee? How's the committee going to function in order to get something done? And I'd add at the bottom of this, strategies are not quite, in my mind, the same as a strategic plan. And I'll say, for instance, in the byway corridor plans, of which I wrote a bunch, the federal government had a requirement that you conclude your corridor plan with a strategic plan, which was really just the next steps. These are the things we want to get done in 6 months, in 1 year, in a year and a half, but they weren't all strategies by any stretch. There were real objectives in there. So strategic plan, I think, is a little different in my mind from just a strategy. And I invite debate on this because I say there are a lot of ways to go with this, a lot of ways to define the terms. So here are the chapters. You've probably seen them, and there are certainly others you can add, maybe some that are combined in a comprehensive plan. And so in my work, typically every chapter ends up with another set of goals, objectives, and strategies. There may be only one vision for the plan, but each of the chapters has got some kind of a matrix for goals, objectives, and strategies. And I had thought, that's one shape.
I like that.
I like this shape. I will tell you, when I've done a lot of work in public health, and in public health, the whole thing is just flipped over. It's the same thing, but they start with the strategies, and then they say, well, what are the outcomes? I mean, what are the immediate outcomes? And then there are the accomplishments or the real impacts of what you're doing. And so it's all kind of reads from left to right, we're going from right to left, something like it, but it's all there. It's just a different way of looking at it. You're either building up to something or you're working your way down from a higher goal. And I thought what would be entertaining if I had time, I don't know that I do, a few minutes to engage in crafting something.
Jim, I'm not sure.
Oh, it doesn't echo this, huh? Is it a different screen? Well, maybe we won't. There it is. Yeah, I didn't realize you extended the screen, so.
What, they've been seeing your notes, the note presenting.
Oh, they're not seeing it on Zoom.
Yeah.
Oh, oh, I have to share that screen.
It's been on this one and it should
Oh, go
be
to screen two, then. Go to that one.
screen two, yeah.
I see. So I would entertain for a moment a thought about, oops, that's not the one. Sorry about that. I have to get over there. Okay. Somebody want to choose a chapter? Am I in edit mode? Yeah. I thought transportation would be fun. So thinking about your town, what you're planning, what would be a goal, something you aspire to in transportation? Bailey, you have something from Penobscot?
Yeah, a lot of people want sidewalks, but we have no destinations.
Okay, well, let's be less concrete. I mean, sidewalks are concrete, but what are you really trying to achieve?
How about walking paths, trails?
Or how about a walkable community?
Enhance walkability and bikeability within the town.
Yeah. Okay, so it's something that, do you know you've arrived ever? I don't. But I think,
I don't even know if bikeability is a word, but
and I can't see what I'm doing, I'll assume my spelling is okay and you can't read it anyway because the font is small and it's not wrapping the way I said it should. Okay, so for any goal, could make that bigger if I could see what I was doing, but I can't. For any goal, you may have, and this often happens, I find in a plan that the committee gets like one goal and then one objective and one strategy. You know, but you can merge and combine and you can be more complicated. In this case, I've sort of created the ability to have two objectives and then each objective could have two strategies, but you're certainly not limited to that. It's just a matter of managing the word processing program enough to get you this. So what's an objective, Bailey, for Penobscot's walkable, bikeable community?
Probably purchase land.
It could be for a trail, you mean?
Yeah.
So, who purchases the land? The town? Or a land trust?
Or land trust, or we'll work with the land trust to purchase land.
Okay,
Town support.
so let's say that the objective was acquire. I'm gonna misspell stuff. You can't see what I'm doing from over here. Right of way. I can't see a thing. For a off-road trail. And it might be a specific trail. I mean, that would be nice if you could say that. Yeah, forget the spelling. Then what's the strategy? You said work with the land trust?
Or grant funding.
Is that the Blue Hill Heritage Trust? Yeah.
Mancos.
Something like that. And you could have a second strategy without, I see my font finally got big. I guess I didn't mark enough. So that's not an uncommon thing. I'm not thrilled with it when I see it because I say work with, what does that mean? Because the edit key doesn't edit this. Used to be F2. What does that mean to work with? No, it's, I'm not saying we don't do it. I've got a million of those in the comp plan. I'm working-
Coordinate.
coordinate.
Collaborate.
Yeah, collaborate. Yeah, it would be nice to nail that down to something a little more action oriented, but it's not bad. I'm just, again, it's easy to throw these softballs out there and hope something actually comes of it. It could be actually like form a working group that meets monthly. You know, it's a little more concrete. And then two more things which don't always show up in the matrix, but I think are helpful is who's responsible for seeing that this happens? Select board? You have a committee already working on something like this?
We actually have a committee for the Wallam and Tokus walking trail, our property.
I want to spell that.
Yeah, Tokus is much easier.
Tokus?
Tokus, Togus.
Oh, okay, just like the veterans facility.
Yeah.
Okay. And the last thing that, you know, the date could be applied to that strategy. You might also just think of the date of when are you going to acquire that, but I don't know if the state's looking for anything too specific. It can be that if you're going to adopt the plan in 2024, you might say by 2026 or something
Most
like
towns
that.
will do like a near term, short term, long term,
Yeah,
and then they'll say, they'll have a key that says, you know,
Yeah.
0 to 3 months.
Yeah, we
6
put
to-
timeline on
key,
ours.
yeah.
yeah. What I see a lot of is ongoing,
Yeah.
which I'm not spelling right now. Perpetual,
Raise funds.
raise funds, yeah. Okay, well, we don't need to belabor this, but you're right. I mean, raising funds, and that could be an objective. If you have a certain amount of money you want to raise by a certain date, that sounds like an objective to me. But if you're not sure, then it's just a fundraising activities to try to acquire the trail. And so you might have for this thing, 2 or 3 steps, milestones. One might be organizing committee, another might be raising $1 million by this year, and another might be hiring consultants for the trail planning, whatever you need. it can be quite specific, but I don't think the state is looking for that much detail. And I don't know if towns often hit you with a lot.
It's gonna totally depend. You'll
Yeah.
get the boilerplate ones, like I was talking about, and they'll just spit back our policies and strategies right back at us.
Yeah,
And then other ones will be much, much more detailed.
yeah,
And it takes a little bit of thought. But it fits in, yeah. And a lot of times these things will cover multiple requirements just with one project, which I call this a project,
yeah. Okay, and I'm gonna slide this back out of the way. And just conclude with saying, I think another thing that's really helpful with goals, objectives, strategies at the implementation stage particularly, but even in the plan, to figure out how you're going to track and evaluate that you're doing what you said you'd do. It's otherwise the plan is often that kind of dusty thing that sits on the shelf. And so there are a lot of different ways. I've got your checklist up there, Tom, which is a good one, because even after the plan's adopted, you could go back through and say, well, on this dimension or that dimension, did we do what we said we'd do? A little more sophisticated is a calendar or a work plan that has certain dates targeted. You just check in, are we on track? And in the business world, I always like to have that. We're ahead, we're okay, we're behind. The more behind you get, the worse you feel. And you've got to, but it gets more sophisticated. Gantt charts are a great tool. Simple to create, where by this month we'll have gotten to this stage. And then finally, if you're really into project planning, and there's not much we do in the municipal world that rises to this, you can do a PERT chart where you've got what resources do we need by this date, and what's the critical path to get through that. And that's certainly when the bridge fell behind, the Stonington Deer Isle Bridge, the little one fell behind. It was one thing. They needed a certain kind of structural piece they couldn't get in the whole projects. A month, 2 months late now as a result. That it's a good tool, but it's pretty sophisticated for small towns. I think that's all I have.
Back. All right, I'm Avery. I'm going to talk about the public engagement process.
I'll be quiet.
I know that's hard for you.
It is very hard for me, yes.
All right, so Tom already covered the requirement for a public hearing, but I just wanted to throw this up there. I know it's a lot of text, but basically municipalities are required to solicit and consider a wide range of public feedback, which is a very broad requirement. But with that being said, we've got some principles of engagement. So things to consider when you're going through your public engagement process and throughout your comprehensive plan. So inclusivity, just as it sounds, making sure that everyone in your community has an opportunity to participate and is encouraged to participate. Transparency, so maintaining open communication about the planning process and how decisions are being made. And then responsiveness, so actually using the feedback that you've gotten and implementing it into your plan. All of this being said, the overall goal is to make sure you have a plan that represents your community and that will pass. If people don't feel heard, they're probably not going to vote for your plan. So how do we get there? Methods of engagement, there's quite a few. I've got 2 slides here, but yeah. So as Tom said, on the Municipal Planning Assistance Program website, there are comprehensive plans that go back to 2008. A lot of them have community engagement summaries. So if you're ever wondering what you need to do, there's a lot of really good examples there. So public opinion surveys. So towns do these at different stages in the process, but you kind of have 2 forms of questions with a public opinion survey. You have questions about attitudes, so the values and beliefs of your communities. So that's things like, do people err more on the side of stronger regulations or property rights is a common one we hear around here. And then preferences, so testing your proposals and your ideas. So, do people in your community want more workforce and affordable housing? These types of questions are usually useful after you've kind of identified your problems and you have your needs analyzed. So maybe a little bit later after your inventory analysis question, or your chapters are completed or most of the way through. But most communities do these, we've been doing them very early on in the process. If you've got a committee that well represents your community, most of the time they can sit there and address, they have a general idea of what's needed, what your issues are. So you could do one large survey or you could do multiple smaller surveys. Bar Harbor did a couple of very short surveys focus on specific topics. Most of the communities that I work with do one very large survey at the beginning of the process, get it all out there. Events, I'm not going to go too much into events. This is a whole slideshow on its own, but you've got information sessions, visioning sessions, pop-ups, focus groups, Tourette's, just a couple of examples. And then stakeholder outreach. So at the beginning of your process, identify your stakeholders very early on, and then reach out early and often. So yeah, thinking about it. And there's a couple ways that you can do this. I mean, most of your stakeholders, you can develop specific questions, or you can just make sure that they're involved in the process at some level or another, setting them draft chapters to review specific policies, sitting down with them. Lemoyne, I believe, had questions that they gave to every single one of their, different municipal committees that they wanted to work with, which it's interesting, but it's very involved. And then this, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but this here is just a word cloud of opportunities, I believe, from DRI, the survey.
I believe we had, SWOT analysis, so it's one of them, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I don't think it's strengths, so. I don't think it's threats, it's probably.
Yeah, I think opportunities, yeah.
Opportunities.
So some other methods of engagement. So working groups, so DRI, Jim set working groups for every single one of his chapters, which is very involved. The Friends, this is, I don't know if Berkshire was the first one that I saw that this term, but it's basically developing a list of people that will be involved, might not be in your committee, but will be involved in your process. It's a great way to get a bunch of extra hands to help out of people that aren't going to come to all your committee meetings, but that's a good way to get other people involved and keeping an eye on the process. A big one that we talk about is word of mouth. I think this is really underestimated, especially in some of the small towns. The town of Waltham, which is 350 people, their first engagement session was, there's 9 people at their town meeting and probably like 20 at this first engagement session, because their committee really went out and talked to people in the community. They talked to their neighbors, their friends, the people that they worked with, and encouraged them to show up. So don't underestimate, word of mouth. And then, your PR campaign. So start this early on. This is, your website, posting in a town newsletter, email list, getting it in the local newspaper. What is a comprehensive plan? Why are we doing this? Who's involved? How can I be involved? Social media, like getting flyers in local businesses and people, like places that people frequent. I'm going to show, I know some towns don't have websites, so I'm going to briefly just play this, but this is A.D. Filson, who's with Mid-Coast Council of Governments, but we're working with her on Sorrento's comprehensive plan, created this website. I can't say it was easy, but fairly easily, and for free using Wix for the town of Sorrento who doesn't have a website. So this is still a forum where people can come and interact and learn more about the comprehensive plan, even though the town doesn't have a website. They're working on it, but. Oh, okay, 2 slides. So this is straight from the comprehensive planning manual. It looks a little different because the one from the comprehensive planning manual didn't look very great on the slide. But this is, your cycles of public engagement. The comprehensive planning manual outlines the stages that Jim went through as well. You've got your first stage of defining your problems, your vision and your goals, considering your options and your policies, choosing your options and your policies, and then the stages to implement. And at each one of these stages, you have these cycles of public involvement. So your background, preparing your background, your fact gathering and brainstorming. So this is the committee, and if they're working with a consultant, the consultant. For problems, it's the inventory and analysis. For your vision and goals, it could be, researching what other towns are doing. And then you go to the initial public input, which is happening at the same time of preparing the background, where you're looking at, your comprehensive plan committee meetings are public, so people are getting that first outreach. You might have some initial workshops, your survey, and then the next step of this is your float trial and get public reaction. These two are, float trial, there we go. and getting your public reaction. So this is a public test of how you define your problems and, you know, your goals and objectives and your strategies. So here's what a committee we've come up with, and with some of, you know, maybe your second circle, like your friends of your comprehensive plan, putting it to the test of the public. Does this accurately reflect our community? Do these goals and objectives and strategies make sense for what you want? Getting the public reaction and then going back and revising. And so that's really that, you know, the initial public input piece is more of the, what's the word? Transparency? I had another one. But anyway, the revising is really the responsiveness that we're talking about, the initial principles. So.
Avery, could someone just ask, could you go into a little bit more detail about what a float trial is?
A float trial, it's an interesting word, but it's basically just presenting these results to the public. So it's when you have, it's posting your draft chapters to a website. It's, having an engagement session where you have a focus group talking about, like, you present, these are our key findings and these are our initial goals and objectives that we've come up with, and giving people the space to respond to that.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Would you do those float trials, posting it on your website or whatever, prior to sending it to the state?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, as Avery said, in Durrell, we have the chapter committee that does the first cut. Well, a consultant does the first cut, someone who's working with Hancock County Planning Commission. That goes to a chapter committee. They add goals, objectives, and strategies. That goes to the steering committee. They make revisions. Then I put it on the website for anyone else to comment. But I don't like it to go on the website until some trusted people have reviewed it to make sure there's nothing really dumb in there, you know.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
We're going to ban summer people, you know, something like that. This isn't going to fly. So. Popular as that idea might be.
Any other questions on this graph? I know it. Or graph chart. All right. So tailoring engagement to your community. So in Hancock County, we have a lot of small towns. And I'm sitting here talking about a bunch of different public events, and it's quite a lot for a small volunteer committee that often does not have a lot of money to work with the consultants to help run these events.
It's a lot for paid staff.
Hmm?
It's a lot for paid staff.
Yeah. You get more people to work with, bigger population. So yeah, just a couple of tips for that. So utilizing your existing spaces and networks. So instead of, you know, going out and doing a whole nother event, I think you guys worked with at Penobscot Day, you had a pop up there. Utilizing these existing events to get out there and talk about your comprehensive
Did you
plan.
crash it? Did you just show up?
No, we scheduled it.
Oh,
Yeah.
just asking.
I think Jim was your town meeting, right? That was when you first did your pop up, when you got people to sign up, right?
Well, I've been pushing the comp plan since I was hired 5.5 years ago. It's taken that long to get traction. And I think it's that, you know, COVID slowed us dramatically, and then people came out of that ready to go, particularly because COVID had brought a lot of new people to the town, and people were, you know, perceived there might be development pressure that they hadn't perceived before. But the conditions have to be right. I started talking about it at the first town meeting and just kept pushing it until we got enough traction.
So things that people are going to gather at anyway. And you know, Waltham, they've got no town website. They've got, you know, they have a town sign. One of the select board members' wife put it out on a news chain that she had, one of her email lists. I mean, Blue Hill's got a ton of different email chains and like folks that they pulled in to kind of spread the word. It's, yeah, finding what you're already doing as a town instead of asking people to go to new things, which you're going to have to with your comprehensive plan, but utilizing those spaces. Identify key figures. So especially in small towns, you get a couple people that are very involved. They know a lot of people. Bringing those people in and having, you know, utilizing their connections, and, you know, they've got sway in the community. So getting them on board, getting them to support the comprehensive plan, and then using those folks to help get the word out. And then, you know, consider your own issues and potential roadblocks. So, I mean, things like, you probably know going in that there's going to be a seasonal versus year round, like some of those issues there, or like, you know, in Castine, it's, year-round residents and students, and also seasonal, and we're talking about a lot of other things in Castine. They've got a lot of groups, but looking at some of those groups that may conflict and knowing, property rights versus regulations, and we know it's going to be a conversation that comes up every time. So instead of letting yourself be surprised, thinking about those things at the beginning of your process, thinking through how you're going to handle it. Okay, I've got an example here, example timeline here. I say this knowing that we've got comprehensive plans in here that have gone for a couple of years and ones that are going hopefully in under a year. So your initial stages, some of the things, forming your committee and your working groups and making sure that committee is representative. The main comprehensive planning manual, I might get that name mixed up. It was done in 2005, but it's got a big list of different people to consider when you're forming your committee, who should be involved. And same thing with your working groups. Identify your stakeholders. So sit down as a committee and brainstorm, okay, for the transportation chapter, we probably should consult our road commissioner. Our land trust should be involved in discussing future land use and current land use. So identifying your stakeholders and then starting to reach out to get them involved. Develop, launch, and advertise your public opinion survey. I have an asterisk here because one of the pieces of feedback that I've really heard from Castine, and then correct me if I'm wrong, but also Penobscot, was that they wish they'd started their public opinion survey later on in the process after they had identified some of their issues. Hold your first educational event, or hold your first event. So in Blue Hill, it went really well. They had one of their co-chairs get up and talk about, the who, what, where, and why are we doing this, all of this, and then have their first visioning session. So it's a nice way to bring your community together to talk about, your strengths, your weaknesses, your SWOT analysis, opportunities and threats. And then start your PR campaign. So whatever that looks like for your town. For the tiny town of Sorrento of 250 people, they've got these signs out. It's posting on the town website, all of those things. And then at your next stage, after you've got some of the broader issues that you're discussing, starting to narrow down and have more of the focus groups and starting to present information on some specific issues. Start publishing your draft chapters. Again, some choose to do this later on in the process. Deer Isle's already got three on their website that they're reviewing. And then continue your PR campaign. So keep people updated on what you've done so far, what you're doing in the near future, and how they can get involved. I went back a slide. At your next stage, so this is, you've got for most towns, you've got your public opinion that I've worked with. You've got your public opinion survey back. You've had a couple of information sessions and engagement sessions. I think I skipped over that, but information sessions, Castine again, for example, they did 3 information sessions. They broke up their chapters by pillars. So they did an information session on their society chapters. So housing, population, then one on their environmental chapters, and then one on infrastructure. Blue Hill is doing one on every single one of their chapters. So it really depends on what works for your community. Some towns are really only going to have 1 public information session. It really depends on the town and what works for you and what their capacity is. So then next stage, starting to actually analyze and incorporate that public input. So revising your chapters, revising your goals, thinking about people's reactions, all to prepare for the eventual, the town's going to vote on this plan. So hold your public information sessions. So I just went over that. And then again, continue to update your PR, update your website. Continue to let everyone know what's going on. I think Blue Hill also was on WERU. I always get that confused.
Yeah, I think WERU covered
I think
it.
Bar Harbor was in too. So there's lots of different ways to get out there. And then your final stages, post your final draft for public comment, present it to your municipal officials, which they should be involved at every step of the way. Possible. And then hold your public hearing. As Tom said, you need to do this 30 days before the town votes or before it goes to the state.
Town vote.
Town vote. That's what I thought.
After it's back from the state.
And then close your PR campaign. Well, goes to the state, and you have a full hearing when it comes back in that whole process. But Tom already covered that. So I think that's all I got.
Any tips on engaging younger members of the community?
So Blue Hill actually, they had the school principal on their committee, so I think this was helpful, but they went to, they had an assembly where I went and I talked about the comprehensive plan and as well as some of the folks on their committee. And they encouraged people under the age of 18 to actually take the survey. I've seen some towns not even put under 18 to take their survey, so things like that. I think finding issues that are of interest, again, Blue Hill's the one I've been working with the most lately, but someone's grandson wants a skate park. And that's, everyone's on the committee is on this, like, we're gonna get a skate park in Blue Hill. And so that's, that's the younger people are seeing that. Someone had an idea and now the committee is jumping on board. So I think things like that where you can bring them in and actually make them feel heard. I don't know if you've got anything else you're doing with Ellsworth, but.
For public engagement.
For youth
Oh,
engagement.
I know, I was planning to work with the schools too, particularly the high school. And maybe do like an ice cream social assembly type of thing there.
Yeah.
And then get them to take the survey.
I mean, even under age of 30. I think it's hard.
Yeah,
That's-
for
yeah.
what I mean, yeah.
I think
as well.
forming your committee is, making sure you have folks that are younger on your committee, I think is very important. I think for some towns, it's very, very challenging.
Yeah.
For most.
I'd say even doing outreach where those age groups are active,
Yeah,
as far as socially. Or
Social media, yeah.
Would be a suggestion as well.
A coffee shop,
Yeah.
Dear, yeah.
you know. That's a big one, there, a lot of
Yeah,
young.
town meetings need to come with free childcare, I think, but that's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
No, that was
Yeah,
great.
no,
great
we
tips.
definitely
Just going to
do
the
that.
schools
Well,
already.
I mean, I've seen
Yeah.
meetings, I've been to meetings where people bring their kids too. So I think making sure that you've got young families that are busy. So thinking about times that it makes sense for people, do you have time to go home and feed yourself and your kid and get them in bed and all the other things you have to do as a parent? Do those meetings make sense for your young families? And, can you, a couple kids at a meeting? Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I think
We
there's
did a Sunday morning to afternoon. We had refreshments. We did a big flyer because we have that big fisherman is our icon, and so we called it Pulse of the People, blah, blah, blah. We sent out flyers. We had coloring contests for kids and
Stinson man.
Stinson man. Kids, they brought their kids in and it was great. We had coloring tables for the kids and parents were able to talk, and
Yeah.
it was a bigger turnout than we thought it would be.
Ellsworth did have
Really
childcare
worked.
for
Wow.
months too. I
Yeah,
mean, there
well,
wasn't
the-
any kids that came, but.
And someone has commented that Harpswell, or Kaylee commented that Harpswell had a similar type of program, an event, a visioning session. But yeah, we had like a community visioning session essentially. And we had the YMCA come provide childcare. No one brought their kids, but like at least we offered it.
Yeah, no, it's important. I remember in graduate school, we were talking about Florida having a gerontocracy. And it's very true here. I mean, we have an old population to begin with, but when I looked at even the comp plan survey, it's good to look at the average age. If you have an age, you can get an average of. A lot of people just get these large age groups and you can't tell, but I actually got exact age, and it's a good 10 years older than the median age for our town, and that's just who participates. It's a real
That was true
struggle.
of ours too.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also at meetings too, like make sure that you get a good comp plan share that can make sure that people, like if you get younger people in the room that probably have different views than some of the older folks, making sure those people feel heard and are not getting talked over and are being encouraged to speak up. And I think you could start to see when people get disengaged and trying to pull that back in.
I think a good gregarious person too is that chairperson that's around all the time.
Yeah,
If they're introverted, boy, that's gonna be a tough one.
I've seen it. Yeah. Any other questions? Any questions? I think my email's about everywhere. I should have put it at the end of this, but our phone number has been the same since like 1974. So call it. It goes right to my cell phone.
Awesome.
All right, next up.
So much.
Yeah. Kathleen Billings, Town Manager of Stonington.
Yay.
I got a button here, but let me just that one.
Which one?
Yeah, this one. Oh, there we go.
Thank you, Avery. Yeah, I'm town manager for the town of Stonington. And I went in actually about the same time as Evie did, because there was a whole bunch of town clerks that got stepped up to the plate, because a lot of older folks and stuff like that, they were retired, so that's how I got into it. I did work under a couple of longtime town managers, one that lasted like 6 months, and that was the end of that. And but it's been an interesting, certainly serving in that capacity. And I have to say, honestly, to all of you people out who work in this stuff, the town managers, the selectmen and stuff, it's some really challenging times. I look through old minutes for different things and stuff like that. Towns are facing more challenges than they ever did before. But anyway, for us, one of the things is to get our comprehensive plan, several things happened. The FEMA flood maps came out in 2012, and Stonington had a lot of problems within the harbor, because we have like 3 or 4 working harbors. And of course that meant the insurance rates were going to be going up drastically. And looking at the FEMA flood maps, it's like, geez, not all of this can be real. And so anyway, we tapped, and I did a little research, Robert Gerber. He was doing a lot of the FEMA flood map. I think he did some work for Goldsboro also too, to get them more in line with what we were dealing with, especially with us, because we have that archipelago of islands that's out there. And so we were able to kind of beat back some of the velocity things that they had, because what was going to be important to us is during that process is, if we have to strengthen seawalls, if we have to, deal with the eventual climate change, sea level rise, we needed that as accurate as we could have it, because it's expensive to do this stuff and mitigate it. So anyway, we had that process. That's how Bob Gerber and I became acquainted. Also too, HCPC at that time was great, because we did sort of this assessment of all of our town's vulnerabilities at that time. And it was sort of like at the end when Tom was working there, we did get it completed, but that was a real eye opener for us. We knew that we had the FEMA flood maps, and then also too, when you think about water, sewer, you work in waterfront, docks, roads, the whole 9 yards. And that's a huge component of all of this. So anyway, we did that. And then of course Bob and I kind of got together again. He used to have a house on Isle Ho. And he said, if you're going to make any traction with this, because we had this huge conversation going for a while, he said, you're going to need a comp plan. And I said, I know. And I said, but Stonington, every 10 or 15 years, would say, okay, we're going to do a comp plan and stuff like that. Well, then they just would start it. It would not get finished. It would not pass. And even when we undertook it, I was worried, but I did a lot of public engagement. People I knew that had specialties, I yarned them right in on it. And ours was one of the shortest plans that was ever done, because Bob Gerber, and we had an assistant with him that used to work. So between all of it, we got it together. And, like I said, a lot of public engagement, especially with the waterfront stuff. The lobster industry is our big core thing, but it bleeds a lot into the other communities. $70 million for us. And same as Goldsboro. It's a lot of money. And so anyway, we went to the harbor committees. I went to the co-op board of directors meetings. We really went to people, to try to get that. So anyway, ultimately it did pass. And, with it, of course, with all of the things that we identified, housing, waterfront, fishing, support all of those different things. And, you know, a lot of it is probably not unlike a lot of other communities and stuff. But, you know, when we adopted the plan in 2018, you know, identified, you know, our different corridors where we were gonna have investment and stuff. You know, it provided that roadmap. And then, you know, with the plan being passed in 2018, we went a couple of years, we started working on different components of it and stuff. Then, you know, you have the thing with COVID. And I mean, that really put the hurt on us, just like it did a lot of other communities. The other thing is too, is, you know, the lobster industry was really under threat because of the lawsuits, the whales, offshore wind, everything else is coming with it. And so anyway, because that we had the challenges that's with it,
Going backwards.
wow, you got the craziest mouse in the world. Right here.
You might be able to just hit the space bar or something like that.
Down arrow. Season.
Down there, oh, okay, oh, look at that, okay. There we go.
All right, so just the down arrow.
Yeah.
So anyway, a lot of these things here in this first slide that I already took up to give, you know, some background that was with it. And these items here, we provided some statistics in this. Stonington, same thing as much as Deerell, oldest population. You know, where we stand with that. 21% of Stonington households earn less than $25,000. We've been suffering a decline in school enrollment, 12% loss in 10 years. A lot of people, because of property valuations, sales of houses, and, you know, it wasn't just the shoreline. One of the things that we were seeing were a lot of people, you know, coming from away were buying up the interior homes, you know, so they would either have investments. Of course, we've had the battle with the short-term rentals. You know, and Hancock County is one of the highest counties that, when I was looking at statistics, that provides the most tax to the state of Maine, even over and beyond Portland, for STR rental taxes. Now, what that tells me is that there's a lot of investment going in housing in other places, but the county who needs it the most isn't getting it. So I mean, you know, that's a drastic part of it. You know, the year-round residents only own 45% of the combined assessed value of property. And, you know, there was at the same time that we did the comprehensive plan, there was a great group of people that was undertaking the housing thing. They did a study with Camoin Associates, and they estimated, well, 30 units of housing. They were able to do capital campaign, and they've put 10 units in. I don't know whether they've got enough steam to do the other 20 units that we need. And for the next one, with the fishing industry challenges that we had, and a big part of this slideshow thing here is the next step that we ended up having to do with that $70 million, that is a big part of our economy in the peninsula. Because, you know, they had this 10-year plan, and then when I wanted to do this economic resiliency thing to figure out how we were going to mitigate the challenges to the fishing industry, I went to my selectmen, I tried finding funding for it. Believe it or not, part of this thing was, I mean, you would have thought with EDA money that if you knew your mill was going to go down or your fishing industry may just, but there's no money for that. You have to be closed and done with before you get any money. To me, I'd rather be proactive and do something ahead of time with it than after the door is shut on you. And so anyway, we did get a little bit of funding from organization. The town threw in the rest of it. We hired Camoin Associates because they had already done a lot of good work with the housing people and stuff like that. And so we decided that we were going to do this economic, a resiliency plan to figure out if $70 million isn't in your community and it affects all these other businesses and people and everything else, what is it you're going to do? And start planning. So, part of it was core strategies, retain and attract year-round population and workforce. Part of that is, we went out on a limb and we adopted a short-term rental ordinance. I've practically been beaten to death and stuff, but, we are doing it. We are implementing. It was not easy, to get all of that together, but it did pass town meeting. Because I told them, it's like, look, what is it? These are the voters. What is it you want your community to be? Do you want it corporately bought up, or do you want to have houses for your friends, neighbors, kids, or whatever it is? This is your tipping point. What is it you're gonna do? Support the blue economy. I mean, that's a hard subject in itself, but, fishermen, people who are in the businesses, that support that, what is the future gonna be? Is it gonna be part-time fishing? Is it gonna be, some of them get the six-pack thing and do, boat tours? Do they go into the other needs that we have? Wharf workers, I mean, ones who build docks and stuff like that, mooring. We desperately need, some of them to go into that. Part of this is to show some of the opportunities there may be. The other ones who's in it now and have the investment, they're gonna be retiring, so they're not gonna be able to keep doing it. And also too, I mean, maintaining and invest in the infrastructure policies and practices. That's an important, factor of it. And, so far, I mean, we've been working hard to get funds and stuff like that, do the planning part of it. And, some of the current actions that we've done, we're working with Jim with, the ETIP. Energy is a big part of this. Of course, we're vulnerable like many other communities. The power goes out and stuff. Transportation, for our lobster industry, there's one road in, there's one road out. We have that bridge that Jim mentioned a little bit ago, and causeways are going under with a sea level rise. So we're trying to work together to do, some of that. DOT did get some planning money. They are working on it. And also too, like for us, doing that, but also too, we were able to use some of the funds to look at Oceanville Road. Webb's Cove is a big fishing harbor down there. I have a road going under with that one. And we did get some northern borders. And also too, we're working with DOT, like for the Village Partnership Initiative. Part of our comp plan, we identified what we call the upper village area for investment, doing it. That may be because we're migrating out, but also too, there were some opportunities to look at for housing. And can we work on expanding our sewer and water, up through there to be able to have that? And it's the same thing with the housing. We know we need more housing, and for the Oddfellows Hall, we may have a possibility of putting in, we have acquired that through a CDS. That might be able to have 2 apartments above in it. We did do another second CDS to look at purchasing the Methodist church and converting that into, we could probably do 2 or 3 units of housing, has water and sewer downtown. And of course, I mentioned about the short-term, registration ordinance as a tool.
You probably ought to throw in too, Stonington blazed the way for fiber optic broadband in our region, and now all of the Blue Hill Peninsula has fiber optic. We're amazing to have everyone work together, and we've got the best communications in the state, I think.
And that was mentioned in our comprehensive plan, is to get, fiber cell tower, because we really had poor service. But, that opened up doors for us to be able to say, Island Institute helped us when I was working with Consolidated. We were gonna do some public-private partnerships with some different areas, and then when they finally decided that they were gonna all invest in fiber, because they kind of put me on hold for a long time, but I mean, I didn't get vicious with them or anything else, and
Good
and when they started merging into, I think they started working with some hedge fund thing, Also too, there was significant RDOF funds from rural development. And we took our town, and when I was having the meetings with them and stuff, Henry Teverett was great too. Because I really tasked him on, we need to get all of the stuff together. We had already gotten the money from the Island Institute to look at what it would be if we did our own. Then working with Consolidated, that we broke that into different sections of being served or unserved. So portions of money could be invested in that to be able to do it. Jim's right. It did start that impetus to get it through the rest of the peninsula because of the pre-plan and people starting to work together. On this slide here, developing the financial capacity. I do have a capital plan. The town does do reserves. We also look at, if we have revenues from surplus, we keep putting money away in different things that we need. Developing workforce housing. Unfortunately, sometimes when you have parcels or houses, and it has changed now with the foreclosures, but we would sell them and we have a housing reserve. So I can use that for some matching funds, like if we need additional housing planning done, where we have to put a down payment on something. We're also looking into, because I don't really want the town getting into housing, but is there a community housing bank or something along those lines that we can develop and do something with and funnel money through a property or opportunities?
Guess we can't do that anymore, can we? We don't
No,
get
we
to keep
can't.
the surplus revenues anymore.
No, you have to put it out to the
Owners.
real estate people. And if you do have something, and then give the money to whoever it is that, it's just a hard situation. And our town always has worked over hard. Tax clubs, everything else, it's the last thing you want to deal with, but sometimes that's the way it gets. But doing some of the survey work and this resiliency planning, we had multiple meetings with community members that Jim Demetius did, and some of these things that, we're seeing was, gonna be hard dealing with the fishing, or if there are other blue economy business things, because everybody said, we need more workforce, we need more housing. They are so interconnected. It's not even funny. It's almost like, and Linda, my community and economic development, she's always talking about, and she's right too, which thread do you pick to make things work and get it going? But also too, the sustainable visitation, we would like to see, and Linda's got it right, a higher value visitation, through the arts and recreation, natural resource. We've always been looking at increasing the shoulder season somewhat to help support the businesses, this work and, with it. Our branding for what we do, identifier, that's worked pretty well also too. We have that little, sign out on our town lawn with the little lobster boats in it. You see the logo in the middle of it. Everyone takes a picture of that. It goes far and wide. And, on this last one here, the investment in Stonington, I have an old school building that we probably have 12 businesses that's in that, renovated it over a series of years. So, it brings some needed services to downtown. We have chiropractor in there. We have 2 or 3 of the lobster businesses have offices in there. We have insurance people. So that's been pretty good. And also too, the businesses that's, made the investment in Stonington, the coffee shop in the summer, Coldwater Seafood's really popular, Greenhead Lobster, and of course he's big into vertical integration, not so much the wholesale and the lobster industry, community centers down there, the Opera House, which is a cornerstone to Main Street, the kayak businesses and Stonecutters is doing really well with doing, their expansions now. But, one of the things that we just did a recent talk with the Deerall Yacht Club up to the country club several weeks ago. And, this is part of this outreach to explaining to people what some of the issues are, some of the things that you can do to help make a difference in it, because, and I just tell them flat out, if you like this island the way that it is, then you need to help us. It can't be all taxation, and I can't get all grants all the time. But what is it that you can start putting into yourself? I mean, we're working on with different agencies like connectivity hubs. We're hoping that, we have some of the school buildings, we can house some of this efforts. We're working on healthcare, because quite frankly, our seniors are just being left behind. We had a nursing home close in Deer Isle. That was a lot of jobs, simply because they just don't get the funding from the state. And, what is it we put in place to kind of watch over these people as they are aging in place, which seems to be the policy for it now. And, set up a community trust to be used for year-round economic resiliency and investment. So, and Linda put this in because I keep telling people sometimes, it's like, and I believe this too, ask not what your community can do for you, but what you can do for your community. This is getting the younger people going and stuff. And, I just had a nice talk with somebody at the coffee shop this morning, and I don't go in there all the time because I don't have the time to do it. But, there was a younger person that was in there, and he's going to join the Stonington Fire Department, which I'm grateful for, because we're getting down in numbers so much it's not even funny. And told him, I said, I'm just really appreciative of you doing that. If you've got other friends that's interested, they're interested in, like these wildfires and stuff, and getting training on that. And I told them, I said, you better get going on some little chieflets too, because, that's the next thing. You've got to have some of this. But anyway, I don't know if anyone's got any questions. I'll be glad to answer them, but this is just some of the implementation things that we've done after we adopted our, comprehensive plan, and then found ourselves sort of in that stretch of the federal government shutting down the lobster industry, and then being, having to mitigate that by doing an economic resiliency plan to give us some, pointers, what directions do we have? And this is our job right now, is peddling this to tell people, these are our issues, and what is it we do to preserve what we've got, or bring awareness to it. Question?
Yeah, so to actually implement what you planned in the comp plan, what do you feel's the major driving force? Is it you? Is it your board? Is it the community? Is it the individual committees?
Honestly, I'd say it's a little bit of both. We've had an economic development committee since the last plan, not the 2018, but the one that was did in 2003 or 4 that didn't pass. And that's broken into different subcommittees at times. It's worked on various issues. I think that, it's always been collectively, there's people interested in the housing thing. Certainly the fishing industry, there's a core group, and I've been working with Maine Center of Coastal Fisheries, the Lobster Union and stuff like that. I work closely with them. So and I think it's also too, we have a fear of it changing. We see, and I have nothing against Bar Harbor or anything else. We see what Bar Harbor is dealing with. You see, I have some people, one of them was on my select board, and her husband was from Booth Bay. Booth Bay was a big fishing village. And of course, with the developmental pressures and things that they faced with corporate people buying it up, turning it into golf courses, resorts and stuff. So I think a lot of it is trying to draw a line in the sand, and also the fear of what we're losing is guiding some of that interest with it.
Was it a lot of the same people on the comp plan? Were a lot of the people enacting?
There was a few of them, yes.
Okay.
There was a few of them. So it started, but it's been, some of them are still hanging with it. And I actually have some newer people, that's involved with it because of, the ongoing things with fisheries. And I think also too, the housing thing. I mean, we had a task force for the short-term rental. And I had a well-balanced task force too. I had, people who was in the real estate business. I had people who were renters. I had people who were non-residents, and tried to have that good stakeholder balance. And, we did come up with something and looked at what other places were doing. And it passed. But that was because you couldn't find a house, and it's very difficult now to find a family house that you can afford to do.
I think one thing that's worked well for the whole Blue Hill Peninsula is that we're working together on some of these things. Broadband, we have a peninsula utility for broadband, the pub group, which is, been a real force. Any one town alone probably couldn't have gotten it done, but we, working together, we got fiber everywhere. And we've had another group that's worked on climate change issues, the so-called Peninsula Tomorrow, a name that HCPC coined on transportation issues years ago, but now it's focused more on climate adaptation. And we've got Alan Kratz, this kind of dynamo of grant writing, who's been getting enough foundation support to pay for his time that we've been able to do some implementation by grant writing. And it looks like, I think we're going to get a wildfire congressionally directed spending line that'll help us do something again regionally. And I'm a big regionalist, so I'm really thrilled to see what happens when the towns work together.
It is, and also too, like with that comp plan, housing certainly was mentioned.
Yeah.
But when the COVID hit and everyone was buying up everything and moving here, we thought we were making reasonable progress on it. And we just went right backwards with it.
Yeah.
And so we're pushing on, different kinds of tools that's out there, like us with the short-term rental part of it and stuff, and looking into what we can, take a housing inventory and, can this person fix this one up? We've been asking, hey, you got this, house. I mean, is there something you can do? There's some of these loan programs and stuff like that, low interest, rural developments just come out with some stuff. So, you try to avail yourself of everything that you can do to do it. But my personal feeling is, a lot of it is the fear of we're getting pushed by things well beyond what we can control. And so, we're trying to push back on it, and hopefully in a good way. Good, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming and spending 2 hours with us. I've got on the left a workshop evaluation survey. Please take it. You get a QR code and then a link to SurveyMonkey. I'll also send out a follow-up with slides and the recording to everyone. And then on the right, municipal needs survey. If someone from your community hasn't already taken it.
We have in-person evaluation surveys
Yes.
as well.
You want to
You
fill
want the online ones though, don't you?
Yeah.
Honestly, they're quick to take, so if you're,
If it's the difference between taking one and not taking one, I'll take a paper one. Yeah. So yes, thank you. All right. Yeah.
Not very good fun.
I'm gonna end the Zoom now.
Well, having it broken down makes it seem doable.
Let's walk them good.
Seeing the right systems.